Stop waiting for next year to rescue you. If December 2025 ended right now, would you actually be proud of who you were this year? Or would you be forced to admit you lived another year on autopilot? Because there's a 3-day ritual done before New Year's that ends the cycle you keep calling bad luck. And if you do it, you won't walk into 2026 hoping for change. You'll walk in already changed. Tell me honestly, how many times did you say, this year will be different? And then nothing was? Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because you tried to build a new life on top of the same identity, the same rules, the same people, the same excuses. Here's the truth no one tells you. Poverty isn't just a bank balance, it's a pattern. A pattern of waiting, wishing, and postponing the decisions that would have set you free. But in the next 3 days before New Year's, you can break that pattern permanently. Most people glide into December with this quiet, dangerous assumption that the calendar is going to do the heavy lifting for them. They believe that on January 1st, something magical will happen, that motivation will suddenly accumulate, that clarity will appear, that discipline will switch on like a light. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Nothing changes if you don't. And this is the shock most people refuse to look at directly. We drift through the final weeks of the year, telling ourselves we're resting or waiting for the right moment, when what's really happening is avoidance. We postpone reflection because it forces us to face the gap between what we wanted and what we actually did. We delay taking responsibility because it's easier to blame circumstances, timing, or exhaustion. December becomes the month where people press pause on their lives, not realizing that the habits they practice in these final days will follow them into the next year like a shadow. When you look back at 2025, the uncomfortable question isn't whether you worked hard or tried your best. It's whether you stayed awake, whether you made decisions instead of excuses, whether you took ownership instead of waiting for something outside you to shift. Hard work is not the problem for most people. The problem is unconscious repetition, living the same patterns, telling the same stories, justifying the same behaviors, and expecting a different outcome. It's a loop, and December is when the loop tightens. There's a moment in December when people start fantasizing about who they'll be in the next year. They imagine themselves more disciplined, more confident, more financially stable, more focused. But the fantasy collapses as soon as January arrives, because the person imagining that future never practiced being that person while still in December. It's easy to declare future discipline while sitting in present comfort. It's easy to plan a new life while living inside old habits. But change doesn't start at the moment of the new year. It starts in the days where you feel least ready and most tempted to postpone. Those are the days that reveal your real identity, and identity always wins over intention. The cold shock isn't meant to make you feel guilty. It's meant to wake you up from the illusion that time is going to fix you. December exposes whether you're leading your life or simply reacting to it. And the reason so many people enter a new year repeating old struggles is because they don't realize that indecision is itself a decision. Doing nothing is not neutral. It's choosing the life you already have. It's choosing the patterns that drain you. It's choosing the financial behaviors that keep you stuck. Every day you delay growth, the harder it becomes to believe you're capable of more, not because you aren't, but because hesitation chips away at self-trust. The shock is this. If you ended the year today, most of what frustrates you wouldn't be the result of fate or misfortune. It would be the accumulation of moments where you hesitated when you knew you should move, stayed when you knew you should leave, spent when you knew you should save, tolerated what you knew you should confront, hid when you knew you should show up. December is brutally honest if you allow it to be. It shows you your patterns without the distraction of a fresh start. And the reason this moment matters is because awakening in December is far more powerful than awakening in January. January is crowded with noise, expectations, false starts, and empty promises. December is quiet enough for you to hear yourself. Most people treat the end of the year like a finish line, when in reality it's a doorway, and the space just before stepping through it holds more power than the entire year ahead. The idea behind a 3-day pre-New Year ritual isn't mystical or dramatic, it's psychological. It works because it interrupts the momentum of your old identity at the moment it's most vulnerable. December is a month where your habits loosen, your routines soften, and your awareness sharpens just enough for you to see what you've been avoiding. In that window, you're more open to change than you realize. The ritual matters because it forces you to confront yourself before you camouflage your patterns under resolutions and vision boards. When people say they want a breakthrough, what they usually mean is a moment where they stop lying to themselves. And these 3 days create exactly that kind of interruption. The tease of ending poverty forever isn't about promising instant wealth or overnight transformation. It's about breaking the behaviors that keep someone mentally and emotionally poor. Poverty begins long before the bank account reflects it. It starts the moment someone believes they have no power over their choices. It grows every time they tell themselves, "I'll start later." It widens every time they watch another year pass without changing the habits that keep them exhausted, unprepared, or dependent on circumstance. The promise of the 3-day ritual is simple. You stop thinking like the version of yourself who never had enough and start thinking like the version who creates enough. Most people never make this shift because they only try to change after the new year begins, when motivation is high but honesty is low. These 3 days force honesty first, and motivation grows from that honesty. There's a reason this approach feels different. When you know something important is coming, something that could shift how you show up, you pay attention differently. Anticipation changes behavior. If I told you that the next 72 hours determine how you enter the next 365 days, you would treat those hours with a level of intention you don't normally give yourself. That's the hidden power of the payoff. It gives your mind a reason to lean in. You suddenly stop drifting. You stop telling yourself you have plenty of time. You feel the urgency of being on the edge of a transition. And urgency, when paired with clarity, becomes momentum. Most people never engage with this kind of momentum because they keep waiting for a perfect moment. They think transformation arrives with fireworks at midnight or with a clean slate on January 1st. But breakthroughs don't happen on holidays. They happen in quiet choices, in uncomfortable reflections, in small decisions made when no one is watching. The promise of the ritual is really a promise of alignment, aligning your actions with the kind of life you want before the year even begins. It's the difference between walking into a new year hoping you'll be different and walking in already behaving differently. When you hear there's something you can do in the final 3 days that could change your entire trajectory, part of you becomes alert. You start listening for the steps. You become curious instead of complacent. You start comparing the person you've been with the person you know you could be. That space between who you are and who you want to be becomes uncomfortable enough to push you forward instead of holding you still. And in that discomfort lies the seed of transformation. The tease works because it speaks to the part of you that knows you're capable of more, the part that's tired of repeating the same year with slightly different details. It awakens the version of you that's ready to break cycles, not just wish for change. The engagement spark matters because it's the moment the listener stops hearing general advice and starts seeing themselves inside the message. Until that point, everything sounds like motivation meant for someone else. But when a question cuts through the noise and lands in the space where excuses have been living, the listener suddenly feels exposed in the best way. A well-placed question doesn't accuse, it awakens. It nudges a person to recognize their own patterns instead of defending them. That moment of self-recognition is powerful because people don't change when they're told what to do. They change when they finally see the cost of not changing. The right question makes them realize the story they've been repeating isn't just familiar, it's expensive. It's costing them years, energy, confidence, and opportunities they can't even measure. When someone hears a question like, "How many times did you say this year would be different?" their brain instantly scans for the truth. It recalls the promises that were made in moments of optimism and abandoned in moments of discomfort. And suddenly the listener isn't thinking about a video, they're thinking about themselves. They remember the goals they set with excitement in January and quietly stopped talking about in March. They remember the boundaries they meant to enforce but didn't. They remember the chances they could have taken but postponed because fear disguised itself as practicality. That spark forces reflection, and reflection is the first step in any transformation. Most people avoid self-reflection because it demands honesty, and honesty often disrupts the narratives they use to stay comfortable. But once the spark hits, avoiding honesty becomes impossible. A good engagement moment also shifts the emotional atmosphere. It creates tension, not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that provokes curiosity. The listener starts wondering, why do I keep doing this? And what could my life look like if I stopped? These questions steer the mind toward possibility rather than guilt. They open a door in the imagination. When someone starts envisioning a different life, even for a split second, they activate the part of themselves that wants to step forward. It's the part that's tired of waiting, tired of restarting, tired of being in the same place year after year. Engagement isn't about making the audience feel called out. It's about making them feel called up. The spark also breaks the trance of passive consumption. Most people listen to motivational content the same way they scroll through social media, distracted, half-present, expecting quick hits of inspiration without any real challenge. But when the message suddenly mirrors their life back to them, they sit up. They pay attention differently. Their focus sharpens because they sense that what's being said isn't abstract advice. It's a reflection of their private struggles. That shift from passive to active attention is essential. You can't transform someone who isn't fully in the room with you. Engagement pulls them into the room. There's also something psychologically important about realizing you're not alone in your patterns. When the speaker articulates the exact cycle the listener has been trapped in, it creates a moment of recognition that feels relieving instead of shameful. It tells them, I see you because I've been you, even if those words aren't spoken. That creates trust, and trust creates openness. When someone feels understood, they stop resisting the message and start absorbing it. They're no longer bracing for judgment, they're leaning toward guidance. This is where transformation begins, not through force, but through resonance. The spark is not about hype. It's about piercing through the numbness that routine creates. People grow numb to their own dissatisfaction when they repeat it long enough. They stop questioning it. They accept it as normal. A powerful engagement moment disrupts that numbness. It reminds the listener that their dissatisfaction is a message, not a sentence. It reminds them that if something feels off, it's because something is ready to change. And in that awareness, the first seeds of action are planted. Identity is the silent force steering every action you take, even the ones you think are driven by logic, circumstance, or motivation. When someone says they want to change their life, what they usually mean is they want new results. But new results never come from the same identity. You can force new habits for a while, you can imitate discipline, you can borrow motivation from videos and books, but eventually your true sense of self pulls you back into the familiar. People don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they keep trying to behave like someone they don't truly believe they are. If deep down you still see yourself as someone who struggles, someone who never has enough, someone who always falls short, you will sabotage progress every time it threatens to prove you wrong. Identity fights to stay consistent, even when consistency means staying stuck. Ending cycles of poverty, financial, emotional, or mental, starts with challenging the identity that accepts those cycles as normal. Poverty isn't just the absence of resources, it's the presence of limiting narratives. I'm not good with money. I always mess things up. People like me don't succeed. That kind of life is for others. These beliefs sound harmless when spoken aloud, but they work like anchors in the subconscious. You can save money for a month, but if you still believe you're bad with money, you'll spend impulsively to confirm that belief. You can start a project, but if you secretly think you're someone who never follows through, you'll quit at the first sign of friction. Identity is the thermostat of your life. No matter how much heat you generate with effort or enthusiasm, eventually you return to whatever setting you believe you deserve. Most people try to change through sheer willpower. They push themselves into new habits without asking the deeper question: who is the version of me that effortlessly lives this way? Without that internal shift, every improvement feels like swimming upstream. Identity shift, however, flips the current. When you start seeing yourself as someone capable, disciplined, worthy, resourceful, and committed, your actions become a reflection of that belief, not a fight against your default patterns. Suddenly it feels more uncomfortable not to follow through. It feels unnatural to stay stuck. This is why some people experience sudden leaps in life. They didn't magically gain new skills. They adopted a new identity that allowed their existing abilities to finally express themselves. Identity shifts often begin quietly. It might start with one boundary you set, one habit you keep, one decision you make that contradicts your old self. These moments become evidence, and evidence is the language the subconscious understands. When you show yourself, you can trust yourself, even in small ways. Your brain updates its understanding of who you are. Over time, those small wins accumulate into a new self-image. The shift doesn't happen through dramatic declarations. It happens through repeated proof that you are no longer operating from who you've been. This is also why waiting for the new year is dangerous. It reinforces the identity of someone who relies on external moments to change, someone who waits for permission, someone who postpones responsibility. Walking into a new year with an unchanged identity is like walking into a new house with the same clutter. Nothing feels new for long, but taking ownership before the year ends signals something powerful internally. I'm the kind of person who doesn't wait. I'm the kind of person who initiates change. That simple internal truth separates the person who hopes for transformation from the person who creates it. The moment you stop behaving like someone waiting for life to improve and start behaving like someone actively shaping their future, poverty of mindset, opportunity, or resources begins to dissolve, because poverty thrives in passivity and identity shifts thrive in action. The life you want isn't built by a new year. It's built by a new you, one decision at a time. Before you keep watching, drop this in the comments right now. I'm breaking this pattern before 2026, and write the one habit, belief, or behavior you're done carrying into the new year. Declare it publicly, because identity shifts the moment you speak truth out loud. The 3-day ritual matters because it creates a structured interruption to the patterns most people carry unconsciously into every new year. Each day serves a different psychological purpose, and together they dismantle the cycle of drifting through life without intention. The first day is about getting painfully honest with yourself. Most people avoid clarity because clarity exposes the truth they don't want to confront. They would rather feel vaguely dissatisfied than specifically responsible. Radical clarity means sitting down with no distractions and asking questions that strip away excuses. Where am I leaking time? Where am I leaking energy? Where am I leaking money? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to reveal the roots of your frustration. The reason most people stay stuck is not because they don't want change, but because they don't know the real cause of their stagnation. They chase surface-level fixes while ignoring the behaviors, beliefs, and environments draining them daily. Writing down the answers forces the brain to process reality instead of the comforting stories it usually tells. The moment you commit your truth to paper, you can't pretend you didn't see it, and that moment becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Day 2 is about subtraction. Once you've seen your truth clearly, the next step isn't to add more goals, more tasks, or more pressure. It's to remove what's been weighing you down. Transformation doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with doing less of what harms you. Most lives are cluttered not with responsibilities but with unnecessary noise. Subtraction is the act of cutting the anchors, habits that keep you tired, people who drain your emotional energy, commitments that no longer serve your growth, and routines that sabotage your mornings. Removing these pieces creates mental and emotional space, and space is essential for change. You can't build a new mindset on top of old chaos. People often underestimate the power of removing just one destructive pattern. They assume change must be dramatic when, in reality, a single subtraction can create momentum that would have been impossible with a list of new resolutions. Day 2 is a declaration that you're done tolerating what undermines your potential. It's the point where your future becomes more important than your comfort. Day 3 shifts the focus from clearing space to filling it deliberately. But this isn't where you create grand goals or unrealistic promises. This final day is about micro-commitments. These are small, specific behaviors that your future self can actually maintain. Most people fail at New Year's resolutions because they aim for transformation through willpower instead of consistency. Willpower burns out. Identity grows through repetition. A micro-commitment might be 5 minutes of saving practice, 10 minutes of learning a new skill, a simple boundary you enforce with someone who has taken your kindness for granted, or a nightly check-in with yourself. These actions are intentionally small because the goal is not intensity, it's proof. Every micro-commitment becomes evidence that you are becoming the type of person who follows through. This evidence rewires your identity far more effectively than a burst of motivation ever could. The brilliance of the 3-day structure is in how these days work together. Clarity makes denial impossible. Subtraction makes progress realistic. Micro-commitments make change sustainable. The ritual doesn't rely on inspiration. It relies on psychology. By the time the new year arrives, you're not a person hoping to be different. You're a person who has already practiced being different. You've confronted your truth instead of avoiding it. You've removed the obstacles that repeatedly held you back. You've created small, powerful habits that build self-trust. And self-trust is the currency of any transformation. The ritual works because it shifts your identity from someone who waits for January to someone who transforms before January even arrives. Emotional anchors are the elements in a message that make a person feel something deeply enough to move. People rarely change from information alone. They change when a message reaches the part of them that remembers, regrets, hopes, or aches. An emotional anchor is created when a sentence or idea touches an experience the listener has already lived. It makes them stop, breathe differently, and say, "That's me." Without that emotional connection, even the most powerful advice remains theoretical. With it, advice becomes personal, urgent, and impossible to ignore. The reason emotional anchors matter in this process is because transformation isn't driven by knowing what to do, but by feeling compelled to do it. Humans act when emotion shifts, not when logic wins. When someone hears a message about breaking old patterns, they immediately scan their internal history to see whether it applies to them. If they've ever felt the disappointment of repeating the same mistakes, the exhaustion of self-sabotage, or the shame of knowing they're capable of more but not living it, that recognition creates an emotional weight. This weight is not guilt, it's relevance. Emotional relevance is the spark that turns a message from background noise into a mirror, and people don't walk away from mirrors unchanged. Emotional anchors are designed to reflect the listener back to themselves in a way that is honest but compassionate, confronting but safe. They highlight the gap between who a person is and who they want to become without making that gap feel insurmountable. A powerful emotional anchor also gives meaning to the discomfort someone feels about their current situation. Instead of interpreting that discomfort as failure, the person begins to see it as a signal. Discomfort becomes the language of potential. Pain becomes evidence that something inside them knows they're meant for more. This shift changes how a listener responds to emotional triggers. Instead of shutting down, they open up. Instead of denying their dissatisfaction, they acknowledge it. Once they acknowledge it, they can finally use it. Pain that is named becomes direction. Pain that is avoided becomes a prison. Emotional anchors also help a person reframe their narrative. Most people tell themselves stories about who they are based on their past, not their potential. These stories become emotional loops they relive unconsciously. Anchors interrupt these loops by reminding them of moments where they were stronger, braver, or more capable than they give themselves credit for. They remind the listener that they've already survived things they once thought would break them. They've already overcome challenges that required resilience they didn't know they had. Anchors awaken self-respect, and self-respect awakens possibility. Another function of emotional anchors is creating urgency without fear. Fear-based motivation collapses quickly because it drains energy. Emotion-based urgency, however, energizes. When someone feels genuinely connected to the idea of breaking a long-standing pattern, they feel a pull toward action rather than a push. That pull is important. People resist being pushed, but they willingly move when something pulls them forward. A well-placed emotional anchor says, "This matters for you," not "you should do this." That distinction is the difference between temporary motivation and lasting commitment. Finally, emotional anchors build the bridge between inspiration and action. Inspiration alone can feel good but lead nowhere. Action without emotion feels forced and unsustainable. anchors merge the two by giving action emotional significance. When a person feels something deeply and immediately associates that feeling with the idea of taking responsibility, letting go of old habits, or stepping into a new version of themselves, the act of changing becomes meaningful instead of mechanical. Meaning makes consistency easier. Meaning makes courage possible. Meaning makes identity shift. That is why emotional anchors are essential in any message about transformation. They don't manipulate the listener, they reconnect them with the parts of themselves they've ignored or underestimated. They awaken the motivation that was always there, waiting to be recognized. The moment of ownership is the turning point where a person finally stops negotiating with their excuses and recognizes the role they play in their own outcomes. Most people drift through life believing they're one lucky break away from everything changing, as if success or stability is some external force waiting to land on them. But waiting is a form of self-betrayal disguised as patience. When you wait for the new year to give you momentum, you're quietly admitting you don't believe you can generate momentum yourself. When you wait for motivation to arrive, you're admitting you don't trust your ability to act without feeling ready. Ownership shatters this illusion by placing the responsibility for change back where it belongs. It tells you that even if life has been unfair, unpredictable, or painful, the next move is still yours. That realization can feel heavy, but it is also liberating because you stop being a spectator in your own story. Ownership demands that you stop telling yourself the comforting narrative that timing is the reason you're stuck. People often say they'll start after the holidays, after work slows down, after they feel less stressed, or after the new year gives them a clean slate. But life rarely gives clean slates on schedule. There is always another distraction, another obligation, another excuse ready to occupy the space where action should be. The moment you recognize that postponement is simply fear, dressed up in practical language, you begin to reclaim power. Ownership isn't about blaming yourself for everything that went wrong. It's about acknowledging your influence over what comes next. It's the realization that change doesn't begin when circumstances improve. It begins when your standards rise. A person who takes ownership stops hoping for the year to be different and starts aiming to be different within the year. That shift in mindset changes everything. It changes how you handle conflict, how you pursue goals, how you manage your energy, how you use your time, and how you respond to setbacks. Ownership means that when something goes wrong, instead of defaulting to helplessness, you ask, what is in my control right now? Even in situations where very little is in your control, that question pulls you forward. It brings you back into the driver's seat. It stops you from drowning in what you cannot change and grounds you in what you can. Another powerful aspect of ownership is that it exposes how much we've been accepting by default. People tolerate unfulfilling jobs, draining relationships, poor financial habits, and self-destructive routines because tolerating them feels easier than confronting them. Ownership disrupts this illusion of ease. It makes you look at the true cost of your choices. It forces you to ask whether the life you're living is genuinely aligned with the life you want, or if you've simply accepted it because it was familiar. Once you see that you are choosing your patterns, even passively, you stop pretending those patterns are inevitable. You start to treat your decisions with more seriousness because you realize each one contributes to the life you're either building or avoiding. Ownership also creates momentum in a way that external motivation never could. When you wait for inspiration, your progress is inconsistent. When you wait for perfect conditions, your growth is delayed. But when you take ownership, you act because action defines the kind of person you want to be, not because you feel inspired. This internal consistency builds self-trust, and self-trust becomes the engine of transformation. A person who trusts themselves becomes braver. They take risks. They try again. They walk into challenges instead of shrinking from them. They stop seeing setbacks as signs to quit and start seeing them as data to adjust. This moment of ownership is why change before the new year is more powerful than change after it. When you act before the symbolic fresh start, you prove to yourself that you are driven by identity, not by dates. You show yourself you can lead your life instead of following rituals. You signal that you're not waiting for a calendar to save you because you've already stepped into the version of yourself who saves themselves. A mid-video call to action isn't just a request for engagement. It's a moment where the audience is invited to step out of passivity and declare something about themselves. In a message about transformation, this moment matters because transformation begins the instant a person claims responsibility for their patterns. Asking someone to comment the pattern they're breaking before the new year isn't a tactic, it's a psychological interruption. It stops the viewer from simply absorbing the message as entertainment and forces them to become an active participant in their own change. When someone publicly acknowledges a habit or mindset they're done carrying forward, they shift from abstract awareness to concrete intention. Intention spoken out loud or written where others can see it carries weight. It becomes a commitment instead of a thought floating in the privacy of the mind. Most people avoid declaring their goals or struggles because silence feels safer. If no one knows what you're trying to change, no one sees you fail. But that same silence also protects the very patterns you want to break. Keeping your struggles hidden gives them power. They grow in the dark. But when you say, "I'm done with this pattern," you expose it. You take away its anonymity. You acknowledge the role it has played in your life and take ownership of the decision to release it. This simple act flips the dynamic. Instead of the pattern controlling you, you are now describing it, naming it, and declaring your intention to step beyond it. It becomes something you are addressing rather than something you are living inside. A mid-video CTA creates an emotional checkpoint. By the time a viewer reaches that point, they've already felt the sting of self-recognition. They've heard questions that reflected their habits back to them. They've experienced the tension between who they are and who they want to be. Calling them to comment something real at that moment channels that tension into action. It uses the energy of recognition while it's fresh. If you wait until the end of a video, the emotional peak may have already passed. People drift back into old thinking. But capturing them in the middle, right when emotion is highest, gives them a place to direct what they're feeling instead of allowing it to fade into passivity. Another reason a mid-video CTA is powerful is because it creates social accountability. When someone comments publicly, they're not just telling themselves they're done with a pattern. They're telling a community. They're joining other people who are tired of repeating the same loops. This sense of collective momentum matters. Change feels easier when you're not the only one attempting it. Even in a digital space, seeing others declare their patterns normalizes transformation. It turns individual change into communal energy. People realize they're not alone in their struggles, and that sense of shared humanity lowers the emotional resistance that often stops change before it starts. There's also a deeper psychological shift that happens when a person types something out. Writing is a form of self-witnessing. The body engages, the mind focuses, and the truth becomes tangible. A thought becomes a statement. A feeling becomes a decision. A vague desire becomes a specific intention. And specific intentions have a much higher chance of turning into consistent behavior. When a viewer comments, "I'm breaking the pattern of procrastination," or "I'm done with self-doubt," they create a mental contract. They begin imagining themselves as someone who no longer holds on to that behavior. That imagined identity, even for a moment, begins influencing their next actions. The mid-video CTA is not about boosting engagement metrics. It's about using engagement as a gateway to transformation. It interrupts the instinct to consume without changing. It forces a pause, a reflection, and a decision. It gives the viewer a sense of agency right in the middle of the message, rather than at the end, when motivation may slip. Most importantly, it moves the message from the screen into their real lives. It creates a moment where they stop being an observer and start becoming a participant in their own evolution. In the end, the truth is simple. Nothing about your life changes just because a calendar flips. The breakthrough you're waiting for in 2026 won't come from luck, timing, or a miracle arriving on January 1st. It comes from who you decide to be in these final days of the year, when no one is watching, when the world slows down, when you have the chance to confront yourself honestly. These 3 days before the new year are not a ritual of pressure, they're a declaration of identity. When you choose clarity over denial, subtraction over chaos, micro-commitments over empty resolutions, you tell the universe and yourself that you are done living life on rewind. You stop letting old patterns write your future. You stop outsourcing your power to inspiration. You stop waiting for change and start becoming the person capable of creating it. This is the moment where you pick yourself, where you take ownership of your habits, your beliefs, your energy, and your direction, where you walk into the new year not hopeful but prepared, not wishing but aligned. Because poverty in any form, emotional, mental, or financial, cannot survive in the presence of someone who is fully awake, fully responsible, and fully committed to rising. And when you choose to rise before the new year begins, you walk into 2026 not as the version of you who repeats their past, but as the version who rewrites it.